Hi everybody, Dana Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, some tips following up on an hour webinar and discussion I did with the Read to Lead group. I'll put the link below if you want to join as a leader of volunteers. We're reading through chapters of Meridian Swift's 2011 book, The Volunteer Shelf Life. I did a presentation on chapter 5, which happens to be about the many reasons that volunteers leave. So we're talking today about why volunteers leave, and can you catch them before they go? Can you get some information from them, like an exit interview? Let's talk about what's in your control and what is not in your control when a volunteer leaves. What is not in your control is anything that happens in their lives that just changes their schedule, changes their capacity, whether it's good news or bad news. It's just a change in their situation, and when that is the case, you just hopefully stay in touch with them. Say if your circumstances change again, if they've been a great volunteer, we'd love to have you back, but kind of keep that open door welcome as much as you can within the regulations or parameters of the kind of work that you do with your organization. So that's not in control, is their life circumstances. What is in your control is setting the tone of communication and a culture of trust in your department, even if you're a department of one, among volunteer services, and ideally that helps spread a more positive culture shift, if necessary, through the rest of the organization as kind of a model of, hey, volunteer services, they've got great communication, they've got great engagement, the volunteers, stick around unless some big life change comes up, and so you're setting that positive model. You may or may not have the power, depending on where you are in the organizational structure, to make really big decisions, like budget decisions that impact the program that might be negative for volunteers. We saw a lot of this at the beginning of COVID in early 2020, where so many programs just went dark suddenly and volunteers lost trust in the organization and there wasn't communication. You can also control, hopefully to a greater degree, how to set and meet expectations for someone volunteering with your organization. So that means clear and transparent, easy to read, great consistent messaging on recruitment. Hopefully you can set up a volunteer lifespan, volunteer journey map. I've talked about that in other Tuesday tips, where you can kind of get data from your volunteer management software or however you're doing record keeping, digital or analog, of how many people sign up versus and go through training versus how many people ultimately join. These tips today are talking about more long-term volunteers and the reasons that they leave. And even someone who's a founder or been there for many years or decades or is very entrenched can get upset, can get burned out, can feel cynical if there's certain decisions that the leadership of the organization is making that aren't sitting well with volunteers, or again, aren't communicated clearly. That can make someone who's been there for several years or even several decades, who is a great volunteer, go out the door. So who is responsible for volunteer satisfaction? Everyone in your organization. Everybody should understand the value of volunteer services. That's part of your job, is to educate other staff members and especially educate up to your management about that, with ideally metrics that are tied to strategic volunteer engagement, aligning with the organization's strategic plan, or goals tied to volunteer services with standard organizational measures and metrics of success. And also you can help influence, if not completely influence and control, that there's a culture of fairness, transparency, and accountability. One of the things that I've seen make long-term volunteers leave is something really messed up and unfair happens to them, or they witness it happening with, a power dynamic between volunteers and staff, where it's clear that staff don't respect volunteers, and that kind of bad influence, really that negative kind of energy or emotion can just absolutely pull the rug out from under what's been a pretty good volunteer program up until then. So communicate as well with staff, maybe do an in-service training on the value of volunteer services. I'm happy to help you with that as a coach or a consultant, or with more videos on this channel. You also want to make sure that as much as you can you do that a volunteer journey map, a roadmap to retention. I've talked about that before. It's not that difficult to set up. There's other webinars that I've done with Visas Voices and other organizations about it that I'll link below. And are you ready to do an exit interview? Is that set up? Is that something that's automatic? And ideally, if you have some of these systems in place, if somebody leaves, they at least are able to have a conversation with you, whether they're upset about it, whether they want to stay, but their life circumstances are pulling them away, they have to shift their priorities. Just have grace with that. Never do a guilt trip or a blame or shame game of like, what do we do without you? That doesn't help anybody, and it certainly doesn't help the image and the PR of your agency to have that culture of a cycle of shame spiral of guilt. So I hope you've enjoyed these Tuesday tips. Please read and check out Meridian Smith's The Shelf Life of Volunteers. It's an easy read, it's a quick read, it's very helpful. And if you can, there is still time. I'll put the links below to join the LinkedIn group and these weekly Tuesday 10 a.m. Pacific webinars on different chapters that will soon have Meridian herself talking about it. And these are free and open, and I hope you have a great rest of the week, and maybe I'll see you in one of these Read to Leads in the next few weeks through early March. Take care.